A very common trait with successful people is they're not content. Everyone's driven to continue to build something or achieve something.
But at what cost?
Chance Kornuth
is an entrepreneur and professional poker player with over $18.5 million in live tournament earnings.
Chance is the founder of Chip Leader Coaching and appeared on the big game on tour with PokerStars.
If it took 10 years to hit 10 million, and then in the last couple of years you've jumped to 18, like what happened there?
I actually got sober.
How did you do that?
It's one thing to say I don't want to drink anymore, but it's another thing to set the groundwork in place and the steps you need to in order not to drink. Goals without steps to achieve them are just dreams.
You've played in 2 tournaments so far. You're playing the third. What's your thinking going into the third one, if the first 2 weren't as successful?
I think like being honest with yourself is like really important in poker. For me, it's like I want to do some self-reflection and look at what kind of mistakes I made and why.
If I was starting out today and I wanted to become a poker player, what advice would you give me?
First,
Chance, welcome to the Gents Talk podcast.
thank you.
I'm excited to have this conversation. We're talking here in Las Vegas at the North American Poker Tour with PokerStars. You've played in a couple of tournaments already. You're playing in a third one tonight.
Mm-hmm.
How do you play in so many back-to-back tournaments? Because you're not sitting, it's not a short game. There's hours invested in that.
Yeah, I mean, I've played a 25K so far, and then the 5K main, I played 2 full starting days and busted 5 bullets halfway through day 2. And it's just part of the game. You know, there's a lot of wins and losses, and you just kind of have to shrug it off and do your routine and get back into it.
Well, you're sitting here in front of me with a smile on your face, so I take it you're still in positive spirit.
Yeah, I mean, my life's still pretty good. I don't let the results necessarily define my day. You know, I have other measures. It's like, okay, got a little bit of work done. I was able to do like sauna cold plunge this morning. So I feel pretty good.
Oh, whereabouts?
I stay with a friend off strip.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was looking for something like that at Resorts World. I was hoping there'd be something I could use.
I mean, maybe in 5 or 10 years, but yeah, it's coming.
Well, it's catching on. I feel like everybody is starting to finally understand the benefits of taking the sauna and then the cold plunge.
Yeah. And
the health effects.
Mm-hmm. And I've done both like many times individually, but never in succession. And the euphoria that you like feel that second cold plunge is just insane. Yeah.
Like your body just wakes up right away, no matter what you're feeling in that moment.
Absolutely.
So you've been a poker player now for how long?
Only real job I've ever had as an adult. So professional, I guess you could say 18 years.
18 years. Okay. And in those 18 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have just north of $18 million worth of winnings from the various tournaments.
In live tournaments. Yeah, I mean, I sharpened my teeth, I guess you could say, playing online on PokerStars and the other sites from back in the day.
Okay.
And so that was kind of how I came up. And you'd play a bunch of tables and grind away. And then eventually I kind of transitioned to live, which I really enjoy. I like the people element of it, like just to be able to talk to people, and you meet a lot of very interesting like businessmen, I would say. Yeah, I think that like the younger generation for poker players is a lot more one-dimensional. They're just kind of focused on like playing and they're quiet at the table. But the people who are playing recreationally for fun, like, you know, they can put up 5K or 25K or even bigger buy-ins sometimes. And these are very interesting people. You know, they're very successful businessmen, and
it's a good networking opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like even at this tournament, I was just thinking about the number of different people that I've encountered in the handful of days I've been here, and I'm like, just from all walks of life.
Yeah.
So when I said the 18 million, does that number ever just sound wild to you at this point? If you ever look at that and go, wow, or is it now kind of like, all right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess like in the last 3 years, it shot up from 10 to 18. So it's been pretty significant. Thank you. But I mean, people don't see like the buy-ins or selling action. Like a lot of my results have been in like a 100K buy-in or a 250K buy-in, in which, you know, I'm not going to just put up the entire amount. So I'll sell action and reduce my risk and stuff like that.
Okay. What was it that triggered this? If it took 10 years to hit, let's say 10 million, and then in the last 3 years you said, or sorry, not 10 years, but if it took that first half of your career to hit the 10, and then in the last couple of years you've jumped to 18, like what was the what happened there?
I actually got sober. My daughter was born December 2020, and January, February, I began my journey into sobriety, and it's been now almost 4 years later. I've been completely sober from everything except for nicotine and caffeine for over almost 2.5 years now.
Wow.
So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Congrats. That's huge.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a necessary change for me.
Why?
I have a lot of family members on both sides that have addictive personalities, and I always kind of knew that I did as well. And then during COVID, I started drinking more, and
I think a lot of people did.
Yeah, and just kind of realized that I had a career in partying and stuff like that, and I was ready to not.
How much of that was, you mentioned you had a young daughter at the time. How much of that was part of the decision? And was there a particular moment that you can think back on that finally triggered I need to change this?
Maybe not a particular moment, but I had I had great parents, but I didn't have sober parents. And I wanted my child to have that.
Mm-hmm. I know that during the pandemic, there was a lot of men that struggled with that. In Canada, so we're from Toronto, but in Canada, the liquor stores were mostly the only thing that stayed open. And there was a rise in the number of people who were just suddenly drinking a lot more because really and truly, there were no other outlets, right? You couldn't go out, you couldn't watch sports on TV, you couldn't go to bars.
Yeah, I was drinking every night. Yeah. And instead of going to bed and connecting with my wife, I would stay up and have a couple more drinks and watch a movie. And it was just needless and pointless when there was no benefit, and just decided that enough was enough.
So if I may ask, if I was a fly on the wall at that moment where you were really sort of struggling with the drinking and then trying to reconcile the fact that you needed to change, what would I have seen?
Someone who wasn't the best version of themselves. That was kind of one of the biggest factors for me is before I got sober, I always felt like I was operating at 15 to 20% of my potential. And I was always, a very successful and pretty known poker player, but it just wasn't where I wanted to be. And I decided that I wanted to operate, closer to 100. And I would say I'm still got a long ways to go as far as the self-improvement category is concerned, but I'm steadily making steps in the right direction.
That's all it comes down to is steps, right? It's not an overnight process. And I think that's something that a lot of people misunderstand about improving an aspect of their life, no matter what it is that it's not an overnight thing. It's going to take daily habits, monthly check-ins, constant work. And there's going to be moments where you feel like you're failing or you're not getting ahead, and it's okay. Be patient, as hard as it is to be patient.
Yeah, I've always thought self-forgiveness was really important, and particularly in poker. Make a mistake, and if you're, dwelling on that mistake, then you're very likely to make another one. But if you're able to forgive yourself and move on and be in the moment and play your best, then you're more likely to have success.
So can you, we have an audience that's very sort of invested in how to improve their lives in different ways. And whether they've struggled with drinking or drugs or an addictive behavior of some kind in any other way, can you maybe share some insight into how you evolved your mindset to go from relying on a substance to I want to make conscious improvements to my life? How did you do that?
I guess the same way that you would try to improve on anything. It's it's one thing to say I don't want to drink anymore, right? But it's another thing to set the groundwork in place and the steps you need to in order not to drink. You could see an addiction specialist, you could go to meetings, you can do, variety of different things. You could replace the addiction with working out or something like that. But I think that goals without steps to achieve them are just dreams. And in order to have success in anything and improve in anything, you really need to figure out what day-to-day work you need to in order to be successful.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you what would probably be a very obvious question here. I had a guest on previously who talked about a very similar addiction. His was a drug of some kind. I can't recall it top of mind right now. But he talked about how one of his most effective methods was to physically remove himself from environments that promoted that type of behavior. So
Yeah.
when you're in a city like Las Vegas, sometimes there could be, or not even just Vegas, it could be anywhere, right? Like if you go to a restaurant, you can, like, you're surrounded by that. How do you keep yourself disciplined?
I think for me, the accountability is really important. You know, all of my friends and family know that I don't drink anymore. And so if I were to order a drink at the table, it'd kind of be like a what the fuck moment for them, you know? And I think that accountability is probably the biggest thing.
And in moments where you feel like you might be teetering on the edge of going back into or falling back into that trap, how do you sort of pull yourself back?
I would say like mindfulness. You know, it's something that I've been interested in and kind of studied for 10, 15 years now. And I don't have a meditation practice anymore, but I still have that power of breath. And so if I am thinking about drinking or negatives, I just can kind of just bring myself back to the present. You know, it's dwelling on that desire that makes it grow. And so if you're able to turn off that train of thought, I think that helps.
Breathwork is so important in like every aspect of life. I think we forget. I mean, because we just do it subconsciously, we forget how important it is. And if you're in a moment of frustration, anger, you're sitting at the poker table and things aren't going your way, it's like, take that moment to just go, let me just give myself a beat here, to like recalibrate and then decide the next path forward.
Well, and it's a muscle too. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So like people that have never trained their breath, they might be stressed or, you know, frustrated, and they'll take a breath and it won't really do anything for them. But if you've been working on that over time, and whether it's a daily meditation practice or just doing it every time that you need it, it will get more effective over time.
When you said that you don't have a meditation practice, did you mean like you were offering approaches for people to learn how to meditate? Or like
no, I used to meditate. Like I used to have a practice in the morning that was like a meditation bench and pillow. It had some like a little bit of yoga in it, and just overall getting your day started on the right page.
And why did you stop?
Not sure. You know, it's something that maybe once or twice a month I'll think that I should get back into it. But I just haven't.
What was the biggest benefits of doing that? I ask because I've had so many people talk to me about meditating and the importance of it and the value of it and the positives that it brings. And I just can't seem to bring myself to do it. So I'm trying to really understand, like, how does it help?
Okay. I would say that one of the biggest benefits I could think of is your ability to like process is increased. And so, you know, I think of us as computers, and we have a certain amount of RAM. If you have all these other pages open, it's less computing power to complete the task at hand. And for me, meditation is a tool to close all of the other shit that's open and just focus on one thing. And when you're focused on one thing, you have more RAM to be able to handle it or to do it.
So it's almost like creating a linear path of thinking on just one item as opposed to the million different things that are going on.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think that happens to me when I go running. I find that I'm able to focus a lot more.
Running's incredibly meditative because you're so conscious of your breath or your steps or whatever. Like for me, the most meditative thing I do right now is like morning workouts, because I'm so focused on the form or the breathing and the right tension points and stuff like that.
What kind of prep do you do before you go into playing a game of poker?
Sometimes I'll do just a little bit of breath work, some stretching. Kind of think about what my table looks like, and I created this tool called Table Spy where you can like search your whole table immediately instead of
like the names of who's playing.
Yeah, and you can see, like, you looked up my lifetime earnings before I came here.
Yeah.
So like our little program allows you to copy paste all 9 people from your table, and it outputs it onto the table, and you can hover over each person and say, okay, Chance has 18, this guy's got 500K, this guy's brand new, and you can kind of develop a game plan moving forward.
How intricate is a game plan that you develop?
You know, there's like steal spots where it's like, okay, I want to be more aggressive against this player, maybe tighter against this player. So like everything in poker is like, so you have kind of a baseline of a strategy that you play, and then the deviations that you take, whether it's more aggressive or less aggressive, would be based on who you're playing against.
How long did it take you to learn all of that? Like develop this sort of approach to playing poker?
I mean, tournaments have been kind of my sole focus in poker for the last 7 years, I guess. And so I only recently started working on my game more. I think that a lot of it is that I happen to be good at pattern recognition and, the math aspects of it, and naturally aggressive, which is good for tournaments as well.
How easy is it to learn that? I'm always fascinated. I play it recreationally. But when it comes to pattern recognition, and I was having this conversation yesterday with a couple of people about, there's so much going on at the tables, right? There's people talking, there's people moving around you, there's cameras everywhere. There's just so much.
Back to power of focus and meditation.
Okay.
Yeah. But as far as learning, there's a ton of great resources out there, free and paid. Mine happens to be paid.
I was going to ask you about that.
We have an AI learning platform that's, think about how a tree grows. There's the trunk and the branches. You have to learn to walk before you can run, right? So you have to learn pre-flop raises and all of the pre-flop stuff before you move on to flop, turn, and river. And ours basically, if you're really good at something, it shoots you into the branches. If you struggle at something, it keeps you closer to the trunk and allows you to focus on that and get your foundation before you move on.
Is there a technique that you've learned specifically for poker that you now apply in your daily life?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I look at everything, everything for me is an equity calculation. It's okay, this happens X percent of the time, this happens Y percent of the time, and then go from there. So I kind of approach my life in a similar manner.
Does it always work?
No, but I think it has a better success rate than it would otherwise. If you're looking at an instance, it's okay, we're going to make our flight 90% of the time if we do this. You're going to miss your flight 10% of the time if you do this. And then you just kind of think about what happens, it's
has that become a subconscious thing that you do now?
Yeah. I mean, it's just how I kind of, even before poker, it's just the way I've kind of thought about things.
So do you have to have a natural predisposition to that type of thinking in order to be a successful poker player?
Absolutely not. I do think that in order to truly be elite, I personally think that the skills you need are maybe some pattern recognition, work ethic, and intelligence. But overall, with the tools that are available nowadays, I think anyone could be pretty damn good at poker. But when we were coming up, it was more just trial and error. We were out in the arena trying stuff, and it's oh, this worked, let's try it again. Oh, this keeps working, I'm going to do it for a while. And in order to be great at anything, you have to immerse yourself in it. And so, back when all I did was play poker, it was so easy to recognize the patterns of what was working and what wasn't.
How do you talk to me I'm 5 years old? How do you start to recognize patterns in how people behave? Because I feel you can apply that in any arena of life.
I wasn't even talking about behavior. I was talking about okay, this is a situation where your opponent's never bluffing, so you should fold, or this is a situation where a bluff is generally successful. And so knowing whether you should try to win the pot or not, that has been something. But as far as pattern recognition, the reason that I gravitated towards live poker so much is I actually truly enjoy live tells, the ability to look at your opponent and say, is he bluffing or not? Does he have a good hand or not? And
so how do you do that?
It's something that I have studied, but again, it was a lot of trial and error. I used to call river bets just to, I'd justify making a bad call. And then afterwards I'd be oh, okay, I should have known he was strong because of this. And then, after years and years of making mistakes, I finally was able to kind of put it all together, I guess you can say. And I actually created a live tells course for my company, but I never released it because I was afraid that it would make the game so much tougher. So I just have it sitting there, and it's this asset if I ever want to release it, but I'm always on the fence. I go back and forth all the time.
So, can you think back to a moment in your career where you had a really crappy tournament, a really crappy game that just really messed you up? And how did you recover from that? And I ask that because, again, I've had these conversations now with several poker players who've talked about the ability to just, this happened, I got to move on. And I'm fascinated by that way of thinking, because if you can apply that into your daily life, all of life's curveballs, you're able to just go, this happened, now I have to develop a path forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is not to feel like personally attacked. Like just because it hurt, maybe you got unlucky or you made a mistake and you're out of the tournament or lost a lot of money in cash games. Like you're not personally attacked, right? It's just like a result of what happened. And so I think that in daily life, a lot of the times where we get upset or flustered or unable to process correctly, it's because we're using the emotional side of our brain instead of the logical side of our brain.
This is the moment you've all been waiting for.
I just dragged the pot like a champ. Game on.
Look at the camera, the lights, and the action. Look at the plan, look at the reaction. Look at the way that we taking advantage. You see me now look at me vanish. I see the look in your eyes. It be the look of surprise. That's just a part of the game. You gotta look for the prize.
That was one for the cameras, wasn't it?
Look at the way that we handle it.
I like your style,
I win!
If I was starting out today and I wanted to become a poker player, what advice would you give me?
Sign up for chip leader coaching. I mean, I would first dial my pre-flop ranges. I mean, no, it's literally not even close. Like, if you wanted to get good at tournaments, we're the best option. There's a lot of fantastic other options out there for other aspects of the game. Yeah. I would first settle my pre-flop ranges. Every hand starts before the flop, and then the decision tree is pretty simple. You can call, fold, or raise, a few different sizes on the raise. And after that, then there's so many different combinations of flops that can happen and turns. And so the game gets considerably more complex. And so starting with the baseline is definitely important.
So can you talk to me about chip leader coaching? When I looked it up, it talked about how, you wanted to help the next generation of young poker players sort of develop and hone their game and their skill set. Why was that important to you? Was this just an entrepreneurial venture, which is also totally okay? Or was there sort of a broader purpose behind doing it?
Definitely a broader purpose. I actually always wanted to be a math teacher. And I had two incredibly influential math teachers in my life, one in high school, who Miss Gleason always had us over to her house and, cooked for us once a week and did math and stuff. And then one in college who I was already playing poker and I had run up maybe $50,000 from $500 deposit. And my math professor, and this was senior year of high school senior year of college with a semester left. He's like, "Wait, you're good at this, you enjoy it, and you make good money at it." He's like, "Why are you still here?" And
Wow.
He's like, "You can always come back to school." He's like, "You don't even like this." I'm like, "Yeah, correct." And I kind of already knew that I wanted to pursue the profession. But that was gave me the courage I needed to do so.
So did you end up finishing school?
No.
Oh, so you dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
What were you majoring in?
Architectural engineering.
Okay.
And it was just awful too. There was 4 routes you can go in architectural engineering. It's HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, lighting, structural design, and construction management. And I was like, wow, all of these just sound terrible. And it was ironically
definitely not as exciting as playing poker.
Yeah. And I was like, this just doesn't sound appealing to me at all. And even freshman year, I remember having this massive anxiety where I was like, I don't know if this is the right thing for me. It was easy. So I just continued to go down the path and, I got 3.6 or 3.7 GPA all through school and without even really trying while playing poker and, doing a ton of intramural activities. And yeah, eventually it was just decided enough's enough.
So how did you explain to your parents that you were going to forego, because you said this was your senior year.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much almost done.
Yeah.
And you worked up to this point and you just said, screw it, I'm out. I'm going to go pursue playing poker, which for all intents and purposes is not a very stable job unless you're wildly successful. But for the most part,
I will say back in the day, it was easy to win. I mean, I was just winning week after week after week.
Okay.
Yeah. So that had a little bit of help.
Yeah.
But so my parents aren't together. Haven't been forever. And my dad was incredibly supportive. He was like, all right, great. Go for it. My mom, stepdad definitely wanted me to finish. but were also supportive at the same time. And I think I like always had the intention of going back and getting a degree in something else, something that maybe interested me more. But the way the world evolved with YouTube and free content and stuff like that, I'm able to learn all kinds of different stuff. And I think that that's, you know, definitely a character trait I'd like to instill in my child, is to constantly like be learning. There's just so much good stuff out there.
Speaking of learning, you referenced Miss Gleason. What was it about her that made her so influential for you?
Just that she like genuinely cared about us as a teacher, like to have us over to her house and, you know, to cook for us and make sure that everyone understood everything. And like, even though understanding in math was definitely something I didn't have trouble with, she just like took an interest in me. And something that always stood out to me was like, I could, even in high school, I could just like write the answers and like on all the tests, and the test said show your work. So she just gives me a 0. And so it's like, all right, cool. Like, and then there was like, I remember the next test, I showed my work and then wrote like 69 instead of 96, like some just like minor dyslexia thing, but she gave me credit because I showed my work. And it was just like kind of interesting.
What's the lesson you learned there?
Follow the teacher's instructions.
Yeah, well, that's a good one.
Even then, like, I didn't get the lesson. I'm not so sure. Like, I haven't really thought about it now, even in a long time, actually. But I'm not sure I really see the lesson still. Like, the logic is that, like, as you continue in math, you won't be able to do stuff in your head, which is true to an extent. But
this gets too complex.
Yeah. Like, when you get into like derivatives and just a lot of different stuff.
Is there, I spoke to someone recently that said that they make notes at the table. I mean, they did it. One person said it to me recently, yesterday actually, about how they do that for their social media stuff. But I've had a conversation with another poker player who said that they make little notes for themselves just to keep track of things. Is that something you've done, ever would do?
Something I do.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. So in 2 different regards. So our Chip Leader AI product, one of the weekly deliverables we give to the subscribers is like a quiz where we put it in the community. They discuss it for 5 days and then we give the answer to the hand. And so I like to make sure to write down hands that I think are interesting that they can learn from. And then the other thing that I'm really good at writing down is like the live tell aspects. So I get to a new table and I'm like, oh, I know that David guy. Like, let me look at my phone and I'll type his name into my notes and see what comes up, and I'll be like, oh, he does that tell. So it's like I immediately will remember, like, okay, he does this when he's strong and this when he's weak.
What's an example?
Hey, man, where do I want to give it? Yeah, I don't want to give too much examples on a specific.
Make someone up.
Well, like, you know, some people like to wait 3 seconds and check when they miss the flop in their check folding, and they like to check right away when they have a good hand.
So like even length of time between making decisions.
Yeah. And sometimes it's more overt stuff, but you know, think about like, if I have a bad hand and I know he missed, I can just bet really big and make sure he doesn't rebluff me. But if I have a great hand and I know that they hit the flop, you can just start with a really big bet size for value. And so there's like, or maybe you want to bet small to induce a bluff raise, you know? So there's a lot of different routes that you can take when you're using live tells properly. And so having that extra data is very important.
So much strategy that goes into it.
Yeah.
Again, I have to ask, like, how are you keeping all of that sort of happening in real time? Like, you're not sitting in front of a computer going, this was the play, this was the hand, now I'm going to take my time to sort of write out my thoughts. You're kind of processing on the fly.
Yeah, I think that I'm lucky to have so much experience in poker that, like, from a theoretical perspective, a lot of my decisions are just automatic. It's like, okay, this flop, like, I raised, the big blind called, it comes A7 deuce, like, here's the sizes I choose from, and then I'll take the live tell element to help me choose which path to take.
Are you a positive person?
Very.
I'm not. Okay. So every person I've spoken to so far talks about how they have a very positive outlook. I'm trying to understand what it is about poker players that they all seem to come with this sort of default positive outlook on life.
That is not true.
Okay.
There's a lot of like pessimistic, oh, I run so bad, woe is me.
Well, maybe not like the average player, but like the ones who've done well. seem to have that outlook?
Maybe we're just grateful. I'm not sure.
Is there, okay, how does your positive outlook operate? Is it just you're naturally inclined to look at the positives in a situation, or do you consciously make an effort to go, yes, this sucks, but I'm going to peel this piece out and go, this is the silver lining?
I think framing, like finding those silver linings, like is really important to having a positive outlook. But I think I've just like always had it. Like I've always had this like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but it's going to work out. And then I like end up playing poker, or like, oh, the company needs someone to do this. And then a month later, someone reaches out to me and is like, hey, would you like help with this? I'm like, oh, what do you know? That's exactly what I needed. And like, that's happened like 3 times with the company, and everything always just kind of works out for me. Yeah.
Okay. So you played in the tournament. You played in 2 tournaments so far.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing the 3rd. What's your thinking going into the 3rd one? If the first 2 weren't as successful, you walk into it with like a level of confidence of, I know that I have every tool in the toolbox to actually make this work for me, or are you sort of adjusting on the fly?
I think like being honest with yourself is like really important in poker, whether it's about your range in a certain spot or, I'll be honest, like I could have played better while I've been here. So
in what sense?
Maybe making a few folds or not making a couple bluffs that I did that cost me some big pots. Like, I don't think that I should have been in for 5 bullets. I probably could have saved 10 or 15 grand there. The 25K, I definitely could have played better. I called down in a spot that I probably should have found a fold at some point and lost a lot of chips and, was short stacked and ended up busting out because of it. Like everything has compounding effects. And so for me, it's like, I want to do some self-reflection and look at what kind of mistakes I made and why. Was I overly caffeinated? Was I too frazzled? Was I talking too much at the table? There's all these different things that can impact the ability to play your best. And there's times where when I'm in the zone, I think I'm one of the best players in the world. But there's times where I'm not in the zone and I'm definitely losing money in the event. So, it's very polarizing for me. So I think like self-reflection, maybe a little bit of meditation beforehand would help.
Is there a piece of advice you would give to a poker player who, let's say, looks up to what you've done, and they may have, like, they're struggling right now, they're trying to get to that next stage in their career?
I would say find a way to surround yourself with the people that are where you want to be. And that's what we did in Nashville when we moved there 2 years ago. Is we joined this like small social club, and there were just tons of incredibly successful people in all walks of life. And it's great for me. I have multiple mentors that give me advice on my business. They look under the hood and help me with that. They give us investing advice, and just always surrounding yourself that, if you're the smartest person in your friend group, you're not going to make it. I think that that's just a fact of life.
You talked, before we started recording, you talked about can we call it a men's retreat?
Yeah.
So you went on a men's retreat in the Amalfi Coast in Italy?
No, the brand is Amalfi.
Oh, the brand is Amalfi.
Yeah. So the very first one was in Aspen, and it was 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay. How was that?
It was incredible. So it was like a men's retreat. I would say maybe 50% networking, tons of other 30-somethings, very successful people. Like Sahil Bloom spoke about, one of the things that really resonated with me was that like 10-year plans are bullshit. And that, it's one thing to have a 10-year plan, but you never know what curveballs life's going to throw you. And in order to like, you can have like a 10-year goal or something, but what are you going to do today to take that step in the right direction? And so that resonated a lot. There was another guy named Dan Churchill that was kind of a famous YouTube chef, but also runs like 100-mile races at altitude the day before the thing started. Yeah. So these are just like incredibly impressive individuals, and talking about, gut health and importance of fiber, and it's the macro that people don't, so it was, so much stuff about whether it's mindset, personal optimization, health, and networking, but there was just so much really good stuff that I got out of it. And we even like broke into groups and talked about what's an area of life that you want to improve upon. And then we have accountability, and just found it incredibly beneficial.
What was your area?
Being more present with my family. You know, yeah, and like it's particularly difficult as an entrepreneur because when someone's working on your company and they ask you a question, it's like I feel this urge to like a need to respond to them so they can keep working, right, and growing the company. And so for me, it's like one of the solutions that I've found is when I leave the office and it's family time, and I'll put my phone on Do Not Disturb, I'll put it away and try not to check it. I'm still not perfect by any means at it, but it's something I'm steadily improving on.
And there's a part of you that's constantly like thinking, a subconscious part of you that's thinking about either what you have to do or who's reached out to you that you still have to get back to and all of those things. I admittedly struggle with that, being present, because my mind is constantly racing about all the different things that I'm working on and what I need to do. And I find it hard to immediately focus. And truthfully, the only thing that has been successful for me though, so far has been literally not being in the same room as my phone.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
And it's wild that this little device has so much control over us.
Speaking of the device with control, what do you think the biggest issue today for men's health is?
That's a great question. I think there's a ton of them. I think the biggest one is, to pick the biggest.
You can do top three.
Top three, I think addiction is one, but addiction to a number, like it could be addiction to alcohol, drugs, your phone, porn, could be any of those things. Another one is, this idea that men should not be able to have conversations or talk about whatever's been ailing them or their demons that are residing inside of them, which we all know have existed for so long. I think the pandemic has kind of opened the door on that. Like I said, everything being stripped away, and then suddenly you're sitting in isolation and you go, oh, all the things that I've been feeling and distracting myself with, they're all coming to the surface right now. And then once they've boiled to the surface and you're like, oh shit, this is what this is. And we've now gone back to whatever normal is, except Pandora's box has been opened. So I think that's another big one. And I think it's this false reality that we're chasing as men. I think we're constantly chasing this idea that to be a successful man, you have to drive the Bugatti, you have to have $1 million in the account, you have to be living on an island, and that anything short of any of those things is failure.
That's something that I struggle with internally a lot, and something I actually talked with my little subgroup at the Amalfi retreat was, like, I'm always torn of, like, should I just be content with what I have? Like, pretty well off. I have a wife, a kid, like my life's pretty darn good,
Checked
right?
off the box.
Yeah. But then like part of me is like, should I just be content, or do I always want to constantly strive for more and more? And so it's always weird for me to find this balance between wanting to continue to grow personally, professionally, and then also just like be content with family and what we have. And
so where are you in that balancing act?
I think that like a very common trait with successful people is that they're not content. Like everyone's driven to continue to build something or achieve something. And then,
but at what cost?
Yeah. Like I often wonder if, and I'm happy, don't get me wrong before I say this, but I often wonder if the person who's working a normal 9 to 5 that has their little boat and they go out on the weekends with their friend and they have their family and they're, never going to have $1 million. Like they're probably happier than a lot of us. Yeah. Cause they're just content. And like, I envy that sometimes.
Oh, I totally envy that all the time. I have this constant need to strive for more. I want to grow. I want to build. I want to do this, and this. I did a partnership recently with Movember. And if you asked me a few years ago to put out a list of organizations I'd want to work with, Movember was like right up there. And that's health charity.
Okay. Thank you.
And after the minute I signed the deal, worked on the partnership, I was immediately now thinking about the next thing. I wasn't even thinking about it anymore.
You didn't give yourself like a chance to be happy about it.
No.
Like, yeah, I get it.
And I realized that after I did the whole thing, that I'm just sitting there and going, wow, I just did that, but I don't feel anything about it.
It's so rare that I just sit there and I'm like, wow, I'm proud of how that World Series went, or how my life is. Like, it's just, I don't do that.
It's this never ending quest. And I think the challenge with it is, again, we're surrounded as men by a lot of, again, this fake reality of you constantly have to be achieving more. the algorithms on my social media feeds know me. They know that that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And so it's constantly reinforcing this idea that Joe and James and Adam are doing 10 times better than I am. And if I'm not doing as good as them at minimum, I've somehow failed despite the row of successes I've achieved in the last number of years. And it's this constant like, okay, Samir, you got to take a moment. You got to recalibrate, take a breath and go, okay, here are all the different things that you've achieved that you never would have thought you ever would have done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Things aren't what you think they are. And it's like just taking that step back and going, okay, now there's nothing wrong with having goals and wanting to achieve more. The challenge becomes to your point is how do you balance that with the other demands of your life, the other pillars of your life, your family, your health, your interests, your hobbies, your businesses. There's only so much time and so much of you that can go around. So it's that constant, you're constantly renegotiating how much time you're allocating to things.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. I struggle with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone does. Yeah.
So I want to ask you a couple more questions here. What is it about poker? Because this is obviously a passion of yours. We're talking about pillars in your life. This one's a pillar in your life.
Yeah.
What is it about poker that's driven you to want to do it for so long? Because you also strike me as the kind of person that once you've achieved something, you're kind of already looking at what's the next thing.
It is definitely a pillar, but lately I've been wondering, like, is there a next step? And the answer, like, in the short term is no. Like, I have a company that's, finally starting to achieve some success, and it requires me to, be present in the company. It's not autonomous yet. But I always do kind of wonder, like, what the future holds, if there's going to be other stuff. But kind of back to your question, I was attracted to poker initially because you can promote and demote yourself. And, early in my career, it's like, okay, I made more money. I can play higher stakes to potentially make more money. And if it doesn't go well, you move down in stakes, you give yourself a promotion and you play lower stakes. And, before I found my wife, Emily, and had a kid, like, I used to risk ridiculous percentages of my bankroll trying to play higher and higher stakes. And, I remember there was a time where I had like $1 million and I lost like $550K in one 24-hour session. And man, I was just like, couldn't breathe, man. Like, I was just dead.
It hurts to listen to that.
But I think, like, now I, have much better bankroll management. Like, I realize that I can travel around and play this like 5K buy-in level and even some of the high rollers. And I play a lot of the high rollers now, but like selling action and being responsible with my bankroll and making sure that, you never go broke and that the family has plenty of money. And it's like, you don't have to race to $20 million to be successful in this game. And I can have like a very good life with plenty of prosperity without having 100% of myself in a 100K buy-in,
Sure.
And for 2 bullets and you're minus 300 on a trip, it can start to hurt a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. I got one more question for you. If I want you to think back to the chance that existed when you felt at your lowest because of the addiction.
Okay.
What was the piece of advice you needed to share that you never got?
Some people are just built different. Even when I was like early in my sobriety and I was holding on to this illusion that if I figured out my childhood trauma, that I'd be able to drink normal and it would be like a social thing for me. And then once I let go of that illusion and was able to realize that, nope, I'm just different and that's okay. I was able to get sober relatively easily, actually. I struggled with it for probably 1.5 years before it stuck. And, but once I let go of that illusion, it's been a pretty easy 2.5 years. So like just accepting that fact. Yeah.
Well, Chance, you definitely are different, but you're incredible in many different ways. So
thanks.
Thank you so much for making time with me today.
My pleasure.
Amazing. It was really good to meet you.
You too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody.